So before I get to the latest story of how the Department of Justice is really super serious about Boeing this time, as they publicly scold and threaten to prosecute Boeing for failing to live up to the last sham agreement they agreed to, I want to remind you about this woman. If she looks familiar to you, she should, because I did a video about her 2 years ago. This is former U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Texas, Erin Neely Cox. I say former because she no longer works for the DOJ. Oh yeah, she got a new job, and I'll remind you where in a minute. But Erin Neely Cox was the lead DOJ attorney prosecuting Boeing and the very architect of the Deferred Prosecution Agreement. An agreement, by the way, that legal scholars all agree is one of the worst ever created. But anyway, it was Miss Cox at the DOJ that came up with this sweetheart deal that saw Boeing not have to plead guilty to anything nor be prosecuted for anything. And this so-called sweetheart agreement was gladly and quickly agreed to by Boeing's legal team, Kirkland & Ellis. But before the ink on the agreement was even dry, guess what happened next? That's right. The Boeing case was the last case U.S. Attorney Erin Neely Cox would adjudicate for the Department of Justice. Why, you ask? Well, that's a great question by you. Well, Miss Cox left the DOJ to accept a high-paying position as a lawyer for the Dallas law firm of, now wait for it, yes, Boeing's legal team of Kirkland & Ellis. And now as the DOJ pretends to get swole and come after Boeing again, Miss Cox will be defending Boeing, not prosecuting them. So with that little reminder of the swamp that is our U.S. government, here's the story. The U.S. Justice Department said on Tuesday, May 14, that in the wake of January's Alaska Airlines blowout, that Boeing had breached its obligation in a 2021 agreement that shielded it from criminal prosecution over the fatal 737 MAX crashes in 2018 and 2019 that killed 346 people. The DOJ said they made their finding following the January in-flight blowout and from the fallout following the incident, which further exposed continuing safety and quality issues at Boeing. But here is the always special Boeing kicker to the story. When that panel blew off a brand new Boeing 737 MAX 9 jet during that Alaska Airlines flight, well, that was just 2 days before the 2021 agreement date absolving Boeing from prosecution over the previous fatal crashes was set to expire. Just 2 days and Boeing would have been off the hook completely. Now that is some kind of karma only Boeing could summon. But now, well, this new more super serious DOJ determination potentially exposes Boeing to criminal prosecution over the 2018 and 2019 crashes. But wait a minute, can you hear that? That's the sound of a butt coming. Well, that's because it's a big butt. However, also not a shock whatsoever. While Boeing is now officially subject to prosecution, the DOJ said in its court filing that they aren't in any hurry to bring the hammer down on Boeing for their continued criminal offenses, and that the DOJ officials will, quote, consider the steps Boeing has taken to address and remediate violation of the pact before determining how to proceed. Wait, but I thought back in January the DOJ got mad and they were going to hold Boeing accountable to the fullest extent of the law if they found the Alaska blowout breached their criminal agreement. According to the filing, the Justice Department directed Boeing to respond by June 13 and intends to decide whether to prosecute Boeing by July 7. For their part, Boeing confirmed it had received word from the DOJ of its determination that the company breached the 2021 deal, known as the Deferred Prosecution Agreement, or DPA. In a statement, Boeing said, "We believe that we have honored the terms of that agreement and look forward to the opportunity to respond to the department on this issue," adding, "As we do so, we will engage with the department with the utmost transparency, as we have throughout the entire term of the agreement, including our response to their questions following the Alaska Airlines 1282 accident." Boeing, of course, famously violated the agreement that allowed it to avoid criminal charges following 2 fatal MAX crashes. But that potential prosecution that has been on hold since 2021, when Boeing and federal prosecutors struck that super sweet deal, required Boeing to meet certain conditions related to safety for 3 years. Yep, all Boeing had to do was keep its nose clean and not kill any more people, and it would have avoided the possibility of a criminal prosecution. But somehow even they managed to screw that up. Paul Cassell, an attorney who's representing 15 of the families lost in the MAX crashes, said the DOJ's decision was a positive first step and for the families a long time coming. Yeah, well, don't count your chickens yet, Paul. In the deferred prosecution agreement, Boeing agreed to pay $2.5 billion as well as to review and update its policies around safety and compliance with federal regulators. It agreed to set up an ethics and compliance program meant to prevent any violations of U.S. fraud law and provide consistent reports to the Department of Justice about its progress. Or in other words, Boeing was set free to police itself yet again, because we know how swell that worked out the first time. But for the victims' families, the agreement was always seen as a sweetheart deal that let Boeing off the hook. Sanjeev Singh, an attorney representing 16 families from the first 737 MAX crash, said the DOJ's Tuesday decision is a frame shift in the DOJ's approach to the prosecution of Boeing. He said the agreement was flawed from the beginning and victims' rights were violated when it was signed. Boeing should be held accountable in criminal proceedings where the victims have a voice. In a letter sent Tuesday to the crash families, federal prosecutors said Boeing failed to design, implement, and enforce a compliance and ethics program to prevent and detect violations under the U.S. fraud laws throughout its operations. For failing to fulfill completely the terms and obligations under the DPA, Boeing is subject to prosecution by the United States for any federal criminal violation which the United States has knowledge. The letter continued that it specified several conditions that Boeing had agreed to but failed to meet. Among those conditions, Boeing failed to review its existing internal policies for compliance, particularly focused on the company's interactions with the NTSB and the FAA, make modifications or adopt a new compliance program, if necessary, develop compliance policies based on a periodic risk assessment of the company, and continue to review its compliance policies every year. Additionally, the letter said that Boeing failed to create a culture of ethics and compliance in its day-to-day operations, and said that Boeing must tell all employees that compliance is the duty of individuals at all levels. Boeing has until June 13 to respond to the DOJ. But Mark Lindquist, another attorney representing some of the victims' families, said Tuesday he thinks it's extraordinarily unlikely Boeing's response will change the Justice Department's determination. The deal is dead, he said. It's off. Now they go forward with prosecution, he added. Well, Mr. Lindquist, that sure is wishful thinking, but I hate to break it to you. I'm pretty sure nothing's going to change. In July, Boeing and the DOJ will appear before a federal district judge in Texas, Judge Reed O'Connor, and he will decide if he agrees with the Justice Department's determination that Boeing has violated the agreement. In a letter to the judge Tuesday, federal prosecutors said the DOJ is determining how it will proceed in this matter. The Justice Department is set to meet with the families of those who died in the crash on May 31 to discuss its decision and potential next steps. So now we wait until July to see what happens next. Personally, you know me, I'm not looking forward to any changes from the DOJ or Boeing, but I hope I'm wrong. How about you? What do you think will happen? Let me know down below. Please be sure to give us a like if you did, subscribe if you haven't, and share if you would. And oh yeah, remember, leave the rubber on the runway and your troubles on the ground. And I will see you next time in the air. Yeah, this is Maximus.